Welcome to Shelf Candy. Today, we are painting Thor's dad. So without further ado, let's get started.
Shelf Candy.
Oh, and this one is gonna have lights in it. Fancy, right? Oh wait, actually there is further ado. In order for Chris to unleash his righteous fury upon the Toledo Painters Guild, he must get this channel monetized. To that end, he is giving away this hand-painted Devil Man print from his first video. All you have to do to enter is like and subscribe and leave a comment on this video. When Chris hits 100 subscribers, a winner will be chosen at random from the comments, and Chris will personally reach out to get your details and ship it off to you. The winner will be announced in the following video. So tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your crazy ex you haven't talked to since high school. Share this video far and wide. Only together can we defeat the Toledo Painters Guild. Being the gentleman that he is, Chris has once again spared you from having to watch him prep and prime all the parts. First things first, Chris printed the base with clear resin, so it can be lit from the inside. Sadly, there's a pretty egregious seam right down the middle that we need to contend with. He's going to try to glue it in such a way that the gaps are minimized on the front of the model, then fill the larger gaps in the back with hope and good intentions. This is gap-filling cyanoacrylate glue, also known as thick superglue. This stuff and some well-timed accelerant can solve a lot of these problems. One issue with fixing seams on clear resin is you can't tell if you've done a good job until you paint it. And since we want to light portions of this base, we have a few steps to go till we can find out how we did. First, Chris is going to use a transparent orange to block in the fiery lava stuff. This seems like a good time to remind you to hit that like button.
What are you waiting for? Do it!
Notice the beautiful work Chris did to the bottom of the base to prep it for lighting. Precise, clean, measured approach, all the hallmarks of a master craftsman. Now we have to mask all that orange to protect its transparency before we paint the stone parts. It's important to go pretty heavy here. You want to make sure it's totally masked, and a thick coat is actually easier to remove as well. Let's get stoned. Let's paint the stone. Chris is excited to use his new airbrush. He has been using an Iwata Eclipse for years, but that fucker is clogged again. Did you know? The airbrush was conceived in the early 1500s by renowned inventor and polymath, Leonardo da Vinci. The original design was massive and required no less than 6 oxen to move. He called it the dolore sempre intassato nel culo, which in English means the always clogged pain in the ass. As a tool, the airbrush languished as an obscure novelty until the early 1980s, with the rise of shopping mall kiosks providing lame custom t-shirts. Just magnificent. Okay, now we can assess our gap and seam situation.
Oh, hell no!
Yeah, it looks bad to the untrained eye, but I assure you this was to be expected, and regardless of what the Toledo Painters Guild told you, the solution is easier than you think. First, notice the initial gray coat has a lot of light bleed. That's okay too. We need to attack the seams, then the base will get a few more coats.
Ta-da!
Good old Tamiya putty. Just work this into all the offensive seams and gaps. Thankfully, this base is rock, and its natural irregularity will make our life easier. Let this dry overnight, and then it can be carved and sanded. Hey guys, it's that time. Let's go ahead and throw all of Chris's brave patrons on screen now. Let's show them the reverence they deserve. Join me now by standing and saluting these valiant heroes to this noble cause. Behold, Jaden, your steadfast loyalty despite the might of the Toledo Painters Guild will be remembered for all time. You know what? I'm just gonna talk to Jaden the rest of the video. If you all have a problem with that, you'll just have to like and subscribe and also join the Patreon. That's how incentives work, right? Chris has painted over the putty with the same grey as before, and now he's going over the whole base with a black wash. Jaden already knew that though, because he is a smart motherfucker, as evidenced by him joining Chris's Patreon. Get it in there, nice and deep. Now, Chris is gonna dry brush this sandy color onto the base. This is the part when this really comes to life. It's a much lighter color, so use a delicate touch. I know, you're right, Jaden. Those seams are virtually invisible now. Now it's time to pull off all that masking from earlier. This will undoubtedly pull up some of the surrounding paint, and most people would take the time to really touch up all the edges. But not Chris. No, you see, he suffers from an undiagnosed medical condition called impatience, which is exacerbated by his acute, untreated laziness. So he will address any egregious edges, then move on to hiding his shame with some red ink. He assures me this will be good enough. That really doesn't look too bad at all. I've seen him do a lot worse. What do you think, Jaden? Yeah, I think that's fair criticism. Since Chris so artfully hollowed out the bottom of the base, we are going to do a little BBL surgery, so the base has a base. We're going to take the base into Bamboo Studio and slice the top off around the widest part near the bottom. And because there is a slight overhang below that, we are going to perform a second slice operation and just keep that creamy Oreo center slice from these two operations. Then scale it up just a smidge and extrude it a double smidge vertically. And that will be our base. Yes, Jaden, I agree. If Chris was smart, he would have added some recesses for magnets so the base's base could be easily accessed. All right, who's excited to see Chris play with electricity? Well, first he needs to correct his magnet oversight. His plan is to leverage the drain holes, some hot glue and tape. Once the glue cools, remove the tape. Mark each magnet with a dot of paint and press it onto the base's base. That will show us where to align the lower magnets so the base seats correctly to the other half of the base. Using these little God-hand radial chisels, Chris can make perfect recesses in the lower base to hold the other magnets. Here's a pro tip. Before you insert these, be sure to check the polarity on each one. And that's that. Another half-ass way you can add a removable base to any model. Even if you aren't adding lights, just think of all the things you could hide in it. Treasure, candy, a map of the inner sanctum of the Toledo Painters Guild. Anything you want. The choice is up to you, Jaden. Okay, let's make this stupid thing light up. For this, Chris is going to be using these floppy LEDs. And this AA battery harness will power it. We need a few other things as well. Some wire, helping hands, solder, and of course, a soldering iron. Oh, and don't forget the heat shrink insulation. That's important. Okay, this is a pretty simple wiring operation. We're just gonna solder a couple of these filaments in parallel. With these floppy filaments, it's important to remember that the end with the world's tiniest hole in it is the positive lead. Red is positive, black is negative. So Chris is just gonna attach 2 lengths of each coming off of the battery harness, then solder on the LEDs, completing the circuits. It's also smart to periodically test that the lights work, especially before you apply the heat shrink. All that's left now is to stuff the lights into the base so they illuminate the fiery bits in a way that's pleasing to you. Once you're happy, go ahead and add some hot glue in there so they stay in place. And just like that, the base is done. Finally. Can we paint the rest of the damn model now? All right, nerds, it's that time. Chris is gonna start by base coating the pants with a dark blue. We're looking for pretty solid coverage here, especially on the upward-facing surfaces. Then we're gonna add a little tonal variation by mixing some gray with that base color and hitting specifically those upward-facing surfaces. This will produce a subtle highlight. I can't tell if that made a difference either, Jaden. Now Chris is gonna hit the lighter brown on the boots. Overspray doesn't matter here, as we're going to be hand brushing the remainder of the boots later. And while we have this brown loaded, let's get the handle of his little hammer as well. Time to base coat the skin. As usual, we are starting with a rosy pink. Just like before, it's fine to ignore the overspray on this step. Before we begin painting Odin's pajamas, we will mask all the skin. That's right, all the skin. Now with red ink, let's lightly hit all the downward-facing areas. The flesh tones we add later will be very thin, so these steps will help simulate a sort of subsurface scattering. Time for everyone's favorite part. We will be applying these as shown here from left to right, starting with this natural flesh. Then highlighting that with this aptly named highlight skin, before unifying it all with this liquid magic, orcish dermis. Y'all ready for some fun facts? I know Jaden is. Did you know? Odin struts around Asgard and just names everything after himself. He has a sword. Guess what he calls it? You guessed it, the Odin sword. He sleeps like a normal person, but when he does it, it's called the Odin sleep. He puts on his Odin boots to go for an Odin walk. When he eats, it's Odin lunch. And Asgardians are too cowardly to say anything about it because he is so powerful. Oh, and what does he call his power? You guessed it. The Odin Force. Ugh. Anyway, Chris is now gonna thin the shit out of this orcish dermis to do the final pass on the skin. The whole point here is to reintroduce a bit of saturation to the skin. If you overdo it, that's okay. Just reintroduce some of the previous colors until you are happy. If the skin looks sunburnt, and that wasn't your intent, then congratulations, you overdid it. Using silly putty, Chris has masked all the skin. He favors silly putty for this type of work because of its ease of removal and reusability, but mostly he uses it to infuriate the Toledo Painters Guild. Using a light blue, Chris will now paint Odin's pajamas. We want pretty good coverage here, especially on the upward-facing surfaces. We're not worried about all this decorative jewelry and stuff on Odin's skirt. We will hand paint that stuff later. Are you noticing Chris's grip on this part, Jaden? Yeah, that's what passes for masking when you're lazy. Presumably, Chris thinks it will be faster to just hand paint the wraps near the fingers. Now Chris is gonna darken that blue with some gray, then realize it's not dark enough. So he'll also mix in some black to paint back in the shadows on the downward-facing surfaces. Then we let it dry. And then we remove the silly putty. Behold the ease of removal. As you know, using silly putty in such a way is expressly forbidden by the Toledo Painters Guild, and teaching others to do so was one of the many factors that led to Chris's expulsion from the guild. Such a travesty and a miscarriage of their self-given authority. Just look at it. This technique is not heresy, it is righteous progress. I should note, Chris is in no way sponsored by silly putty. Though he would consider such an alliance, they would make a powerful ally in Chris's crusade against the Toledo Painters Guild. Chris is now painting the areas of the Odin wraps he missed when he refused to mask the fingers. This is just the same blue that he used when he painted the rest of the Odin pajamas. And now just a quick base coat on these straps, which I can safely assume are actually called Odin straps. Chris will now apply a blue wash to all the clothing to punch up all the nice detail and texture in the sculpt. You can just slop it on pretty liberally and just move it from areas where you went too heavy to areas that need it. Just keep an eye out for pooling and you'll be fine. Now with Sigor Brown, Chris is going to revisit the Odin boots. This is a potent paint that dries fast, so Chris moves quick using the biggest brush he can before switching to a tiny brush for the hard-to-reach areas. Perfect. Now for the Odin head. Chris has masked the Odin face and is just going to give the Odin helmet a grey base coat before moving on to the Odin beard. With this brown, we shall now paint the beard. Not much to this step, just be mindful of the helmet and face. We don't want to paint that shit twice. Well, you might, but Chris would prefer not to. So Odin is missing an eye, and now we have to paint his little eye patch. Chris has chosen gold for this, so it's going to take anywhere between 6 and 72 coats. Gold is the worst, and this gold has the best coverage Chris could find, but he's not a fan of how vibrant it is. It just looks fake. This is an Artis Opus dry brush. These are wonderful. Chris is going to use it to dry brush the highlights on the beard. If you're not familiar with Artis Opus, check out his channel. Really skilled painter and very instructional. This is one of his smaller brushes, which is handy for getting behind this helmet. This isn't a sponsorship. Chris paid for these. He just really likes them and thinks you will too. I'll drop his links in the description. Sensational. Now for Odin's remaining eye. First, Chris is going to carefully paint it a dark brown and position the model in such a way that you can't see what he's doing. Sorry, Jaden. You deserve better. And a little deck tan for the sclera. Chris, you really need to work on your camera positioning. Fun fact, the Odin force leaks out of Odin's eyeball. Chris will attempt to simulate that now using this fluorescent yellow paint that's also frustratingly green looking. Well, looks like another case of this is good enough. Yep, we're just moving on, apparently to cleaning up the edges of the helmet using that same gray from before. Now Chris will paint a little white in the center of the eye. He assures me this will make a difference. Using gunmetal, Chris is going to apply a base coat to Mjolnir, which everyone knows is Spanish for the Odin hammer. Oh, it's that time, Jaden. Time to paint that body hair. We want this to look sparse, so Chris is just going to dry brush the same brown he used for the beard onto the forearms and chest. Easy peasy. And now back to Sigor Brown for these Ultimate Warrior strap things. This part is pretty tedious. You'll want to go slow. Getting this on the skin will be really noticeable and drive you nuts. But if you take your time, reorient the model for maximum control, well, your friends and family will be amazed. Perfect. We're getting close, Jaden. This has been a long one, but we are on the home stretch. Chris is gonna dry brush some highlights on the boots to pop out some of these textures. And breaking with tradition, Chris is going to use chrome instead of gunmetal for the Odin buckles on the Odin boots. Careful, careful now. Perfect. Time for all the fiddly little details. Starting with Iraqi sand, Chris is going to base coat all the Odin fluff on the pajamas. It's helpful to start with a larger brush to fill in the bulk, then switch to a smaller one when you start painting near all the multi-step work that you've already finished. Now Chris is going to mix this darker blue with the original blue to paint the trim on the Odin jammies. We aren't going too much darker, just enough to create some visual interest and establish a clear break between the different volumes and textures. For Odin's many belts, regal adornments and animal hide flappy things, we will start with our best friend, Sigor Brown. Oop! Chris made a little oopsie. It's inevitable, but mistakes like that are easily correctable if you catch it fast enough. Chris recommends keeping some wet Q-tips within reach, just in case. With this flesh tone, Chris will paint these crotch ribbons. Did you know? Back in the day, crotch ribbons were a status symbol. Odin was known to flex on people by just strutting around wearing these, naming stuff and showing everyone how many peppercorns he had. Peppercorns was like money back then. A modern-day equivalent would be something like, I don't know, pulling up to a Starbucks in a G-Wagon, juggling gold bars, and then placing a very specific coffee order. Now let's get some highlights on this stuff. For this, Chris will be using the extra-large Artis Opus dry brush. Chris is trying to get as much raised detail to pop out as he can, so angle of attack isn't important. He is simulating wear and not concerned with trying to imply a light source. And now with the medium size, the lighter toned crotch ribbons and butt flap. Ah yes, good old gunmetal for all the rivets. Gunmetal is one of Chris's favorite metallics, such solid coverage, unlike every fucking gold paint. Looks like you missed a few supports there, Chris. Oh, you're just gonna paint right over it and edit out that footage? No, I'm sure no one will notice. Finally, the vambrace details. Chris is just gonna pin wash these engravings with Nuln oil. Fun fact, the process of a liquid flowing in a narrow space without the assistance of external forces like gravity is known as capillary action, and its first recorded observation was by, you guessed it, Leonardo da Vinci. Once this dries, you can use a damp Q-tip to wipe away any blotches. Yes, it's time to complete the Odin hammer. Unsurprisingly, Chris is gonna paint the pommel with gunmetal before adding a wash to the handle. Chris thinks this dark oath flesh adds the right amount of contrast. And now, just like the vambraces, we're gonna pin wash all the carvings in the Odin hammer. Once this dries, you can either dry brush over it with more gunmetal or do the damp Q-tip thing. After this, all that remains is the Odin helmet. We're using Tamiya panel liner for this, specifically because it's easy to just wipe away using enamel thinner, which won't react with acrylics, thus protecting the existing finish. This is the last step, just a few edge highlights and light weathering using chrome and black. Notice how subtle the panel liner around the rivets is. Chris loves that stuff. Well, except its stupid applicator. Do something about that, will you, Tamiya?
Do it!
All right, guys, I think it's done. Behold! All right, I'm gonna go now. Subscribe. Fuckers!
Shelf candy!
My nozzle shelf candy gets nice with that paint.